I am Gerald, 34, and I have spent my entire life feeling second best to my younger brother Marcus. Every family gathering is the same old story. Today, as I pulled into my parents' driveway for Thanksgiving dinner, I felt that familiar knot in my stomach. Mom answered the door with her usual hug, before immediately launching into praise about Marcus buying a gorgeous new home. When she asked when I would finally catch up, something in me snapped. I smiled and said, "I did. I just didn't invite anyone who doubts me." The silence was deafening. If you have ever felt unappreciated by your family, drop a like and subscribe. Let me know where you are watching from, and stick around to hear how my family reacted when I finally stood my ground after years of being overlooked. To understand what happened at that Thanksgiving dinner, you need to understand my family. I grew up in a neat suburban neighborhood outside Boston. Our house was the one with the perfectly manicured lawn and the American flag hanging by the front door. My father, Richard, was a successful accountant who believed success came in one flavor: financial security, a respectable job title, and a life that impressed the neighbors. My mother, Patricia, was the quintessential homemaker who measured her worth by how well her children reflected on her. For the first 5 years of my life, I was their only focus. I have vague memories of those days, of being the center of their world. But then Marcus was born, and the spotlight shifted so dramatically it was like someone had flipped a switch. From the beginning, Marcus was the golden child. He started walking early, talking early, and seemed to have a natural talent for anything my parents valued. "Marcus is so good with numbers," my father would say proudly when my 7-year-old brother could do basic arithmetic. Meanwhile, my detailed drawings of buildings and landscapes were pinned to the refrigerator with a distracted, "That's nice, Gerald," before being replaced by Marcus's perfect math test a day later. By the time I was in middle school, the roles in our family were firmly established. Marcus was the achiever, the one destined for greatness. I was the creative one, which in my father's vocabulary was just a polite way of saying I wasn't practical enough. My mother would say things like, "Gerald has such interesting hobbies," when discussing my passion for architecture and design with her friends. Hobbies. Never talents, never potential careers. Just hobbies. Our family home told the story better than words could. The living room featured a shrine to Marcus's achievements, trophies from math competitions, certificates of achievement, honor roll notifications. My art contest wins and design awards were tucked away in my bedroom, occasionally acknowledged but never celebrated. High school only widened the gap between us. While Marcus became class president and captain of the debate team, I found refuge in art class and the architecture club. My teachers recognized my talent. Mr. Peterson, my art teacher, even arranged for me to meet with a professor from a prestigious architecture program. When I told my parents about it at dinner, my father nodded absently and then turned to Marcus to ask about his SAT prep. "Your brother is setting himself up for real success," he would tell me, as if I needed the reminder that my interests weren't considered valuable. College was my first taste of freedom. I was accepted into a competitive architecture program, and for once, I felt validated. My parents seemed momentarily impressed, but it quickly became apparent that they saw my acceptance as a lucky break rather than a result of my hard work and talent. Marcus, predictably, went to an Ivy League school to study business and finance. Every family gathering during those years featured lengthy discussions about Marcus's networking opportunities, internship prospects, and future earning potential. When relatives asked about me, my mother would say, "Gerald is still doing his architecture thing. It makes him happy," with the kind of tone that suggested happiness was a consolation prize for not pursuing something more practical. After graduation, our paths diverged even further. Marcus went straight into a high-paying finance job in Boston, complete with a corner office and business cards that impressed our father. I took a position with a respected architecture firm, starting at the bottom but with a clear path to growth. Family gatherings developed a predictable pattern. Someone would ask Marcus about his recent promotion, his investments, or his latest luxury purchase. He would respond with false modesty while soaking up the admiration. Then, someone would turn to me with that look of concern and ask, "And how are things with you, Gerald?" As if they expected to hear I was struggling. For years, I played along. I downplayed my successes, kept quiet about my promotions, and let them believe I was just getting by. It was easier than trying to compete with the golden child. My mother would pat my hand and say, "You'll figure things out eventually," while my father would offer unsolicited career advice, suggesting it wasn't too late to get an MBA. The breaking point came 3 years ago, at Christmas dinner. Marcus had just announced his engagement to Allison, a woman from a wealthy family who fit perfectly into the success narrative my parents had written. After 20 minutes of celebration and questions about wedding plans, my father turned to me and asked when I was going to get serious about my life. I had just been named the youngest project manager in my firm's history. I had an apartment I loved in a vibrant neighborhood. I was dating someone who appreciated my creative vision. By any reasonable measure, I was successful. But in that moment, looking at my father's concerned face, I realized something important. They would never see my success because it didn't look like what they expected. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I stopped sharing details about my life with my family. When they asked vague questions about work, I gave vague answers. When they asked about my personal life, I changed the subject. I created a boundary between the life I was building and the judgment I had faced for years. Little did they know that behind my silence, I was about to take the biggest risk of my career, one that would lead to the moment when I would finally stand up for myself at the Thanksgiving table. After 6 years working at Bradshaw Architecture, I had earned a solid reputation. My designs were innovative, focused on sustainability before it became a buzzword, and I had developed relationships with clients who valued my vision. But I was tired of seeing my ideas watered down by committee decisions and budget constraints. I wanted to create spaces that reflected my belief that architecture should work with nature, not against it. 2 years ago, I made the decision that my father would have called irresponsible and reckless. I left my stable job and started my own sustainable design firm, Green Horizon Architecture. The early days were everything my parents had feared: inconsistent income, late nights, and the constant stress of finding clients who would take a chance on a new business. During those first 6 months, the doubts crept in. Maybe my father was right. Maybe I should have played it safe. I almost called it quits when my savings started to dwindle and I had to take on freelance work to make rent. But something kept me going, a stubborn belief that my vision was worth fighting for. Then I met Sophie. She came to a small business networking event where I was giving a presentation on sustainable architecture. She approached me afterward, not with the usual questions about cost and practicality, but with thoughtful observations about how my designs created a dialogue between indoor and outdoor spaces. Sophie ran a marketing consultancy, focused on eco-friendly businesses. She saw potential in my work that went beyond aesthetics. "Your designs tell a story about how we could live," she said, over coffee the following week. "But you're telling that story to the wrong audience." With Sophie's guidance, I repositioned my business. Instead of trying to compete with established firms for traditional clients, we targeted a growing niche: environmentally conscious tech entrepreneurs and progressive businesses looking to make statements with their buildings. Sophie helped me refine my pitch, create a compelling portfolio, and connect with clients who valued sustainability as much as I did. Our professional relationship quickly evolved into something more. Sophie wasn't just brilliant at marketing. She understood my passion in a way no one in my family ever had. Our first kiss happened late one night, as we celebrated landing a contract for an eco-friendly office building. By our third date, I knew she was someone special. The breakthrough came when a prominent tech CEO hired me to design his family home. He wanted something revolutionary, a house that produced more energy than it consumed, used reclaimed and sustainable materials, and blended seamlessly with the surrounding landscape. It was exactly the kind of project I had dreamed of. That house took 8 months to design and another year to build. The result was featured in Architectural Digest with a 6-page spread titled "The Future of Home Design." Suddenly, Green Horizon wasn't just another small firm struggling to make it. We had a waiting list of clients eager for sustainable, beautiful spaces. With success came financial security beyond what even my father could criticize. My business grew from just me to a team of 12 passionate architects and designers. We moved from my tiny home office to a renovated warehouse space with solar panels and a living wall that embodied our philosophy. As the business thrived, I decided to put down roots. I found a historic Victorian home in one of Boston's oldest neighborhoods, a place with character and history, but in need of love. Over 6 months, I transformed it using the same sustainable principles that defined my business. I restored original woodwork, installed state-of-the-art energy systems hidden within the classic architecture, and created a backyard oasis of native plants and a small vegetable garden that Sophie loved to tend. My home became my sanctuary and a showcase of my values, a place where history and future-thinking design could coexist beautifully. Sophie practically moved in, though we maintained her apartment as an office space. We hosted dinner parties for friends and clients, created holiday traditions of our own, and built the kind of life that felt authentic to who we were. All this time, my family remained in the dark. They knew I had started my own business but assumed it was struggling. They knew I had moved but pictured me in some tiny apartment. They knew about Sophie but thought she was just another girlfriend who would eventually be replaced when I grew up and found someone more suitable. I maintained the distance deliberately, protecting my success from their judgment and comparison. When my mother would call and ask how business was going, I would say, "It has its ups and downs," which was true of any business, but led her to assume I was barely getting by. When my father asked about my living situation, I would say, "I found a place that works for me," letting him believe what he wanted. There was peace in this separation. For the first time since childhood, I wasn't measuring my achievements against Marcus's yardstick. I wasn't seeking approval that would never come. I was living life on my terms, and it was more satisfying than any validation my family could offer. As Thanksgiving approached this year, Sophie asked why we couldn't host at our home. "I'm tired of hiding our life," she said one evening as we sat on our back porch, watching the sunset. "You've created something beautiful here, in this house, and with your business. Don't you want them to see that?" I considered her words carefully. Part of me wanted to maintain the boundary that had allowed me to flourish. Another part wondered if it was time to bridge the gap, to allow my family the chance to see me as I truly was. "Maybe after the holidays," I said, not quite ready to disrupt the fragile peace. Little did I know that decision would be made for me at the Thanksgiving table, when years of silence would finally give way to truth. The drive to my parents' suburban home took 45 minutes from the city. I could have mapped the route with my eyes closed, the highway exit, the winding roads through identical subdivisions, and finally, Maple Street, where my parents had lived for 30 years. Their colonial-style house looked the same as always, American flag by the door, seasonal wreath on display, and my mother's carefully tended flower beds now covered with protective winter mulch. I parked my car, a modest electric vehicle that belied my financial situation, behind my father's large SUV. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed the bottle of wine I had brought, an expensive vintage that I knew my father wouldn't recognize or appreciate. Sophie had offered to come with me, but I had declined. "Let me handle this one alone," I had told her. "I'll call you after." My mother answered the door in an apron, embroidered with fall leaves, her face breaking into a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Gerald, you're early. Come in, come in." Her hug was quick, perfunctory, before she was turning back toward the kitchen. "Your father's watching the game in the den. Aunt Meredith and Uncle James are already here with the kids." The house smelled of roasting turkey and pumpkin pie, the familiar sense of childhood Thanksgivings. Family photos lined the hallway, and I noticed, as always, the disproportionate number featuring Marcus's achievements, his graduation, his awards, his engagement photos. Mine were there too, but fewer, less prominently displayed. In the living room, Aunt Meredith sat with her husband James and their teenage children, Michael and Emily. Aunt Meredith was my mother's younger sister, more relaxed and genuinely warm than my mother had ever been. "Gerald," she exclaimed, rising to give me a proper hug. "It's been too long. Tell me everything." Before I could respond, my father's voice boomed from the doorway of his den. "Is that Gerald? Come watch the fourth quarter, son. Patriots might actually win this one." This was his version of a greeting, an invitation into his space, without any actual interest in my life. "In a minute, Dad," I replied, turning back to Aunt Meredith. "Work's been keeping me busy. How are things with you?" We made small talk about her job teaching high school English and Uncle James's recent retirement. Michael was applying to colleges, and Emily had just made the volleyball team. Normal, pleasant conversation without judgment. The front door opened again, and a rush of cold air accompanied the golden couple's arrival. Marcus and Allison stepped in, Marcus carrying a small gift bag, Allison balancing a store-bought pie. My mother practically sprinted to the door. "There they are," she gushed, embracing them both with more enthusiasm than she had shown me. "Oh, Allison, that coat is gorgeous. Is it new? And Marcus, you look so handsome. Come in, everyone's here now." Marcus caught my eye over our mother's shoulder and gave me a nod. "Hey, bro," he said casually. At 39, he still had the confident demeanor of someone who had never questioned his place in the world. His designer clothes and expensive watch spoke of success in the language my parents understood best. "Hey, Marcus, Allison." I nodded back, noticing how my father immediately emerged from his den to greet them properly, the football game suddenly less important. "Marcus, my boy." He clapped my brother on the shoulder. "How's the new position treating you? Still enjoying that corner office?" And just like that, the spotlight shifted entirely to Marcus. He began describing his recent promotion, the team he was managing, the deals he was closing. Allison stood beside him, the perfect corporate wife, nodding at appropriate moments and adding details about the business dinner parties they hosted. My mother steered me toward the kitchen. "Gerald, you can help me finish up the sides. The turkey needs another hour." This was typical. Marcus entertained in the living room while I was relegated to kitchen duty. I rolled up my sleeves and started mashing potatoes, listening to the murmur of admiration from the living room. Through the doorway, I could see my mother's phone being passed around. "Look at these pictures of Marcus and Allison's new house," she was saying. 5 bedrooms, a 3-car garage, and that pool area. It's in Brookline, you know, in that gated community. I focused on the potatoes, adding butter and cream with more force than necessary. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Sophie. "How's it going? Remember, your worth doesn't depend on their approval." I smiled, typing back. The usual Marcus show. "I'm on potato duty." As I finished the potatoes and moved on to arranging the dinner rolls in a basket, I heard my name mentioned in the living room. "And what about Gerald? Still doing that green building thing?" Uncle James asked. "Oh, you know Gerald," my mother replied, her voice carrying that familiar tone of affectionate dismissal. "He's still working on his little architecture business. It's a phase, but he seems to enjoy it." My hand tightened around the breadbasket. A phase. I had been running my own successful firm for 2 years, been featured in national magazines, and won sustainability awards. But to my mother, it was still a phase. "He's always been the artistic one," she continued. "Not everyone is cut out for the corporate world like Marcus." I set the breadbasket down carefully, fighting the urge to walk into the living room and set the record straight. "Not yet," I told myself. "Not like this." Aunt Meredith appeared in the kitchen doorway, offering to help. Unlike my mother, she asked thoughtful questions about my work, actually listening to the carefully edited answers I gave. But even her genuine interest was interrupted when my mother called everyone to see more pictures of Marcus's house. Can you believe the chandelier in their dining room? Must have cost a fortune. And look at that kitchen. Allison says they're having the cabinets custom made. The afternoon continued in this vein. Every conversation circled back to Marcus's success. His house, his car, his salary, his connections. I remained in the background, helping with dinner preparations, responding to texts from Sophie, and feeling the familiar mix of frustration and resignation. As we finally prepared to sit down for dinner, I caught Marcus watching me with an odd expression, something between smugness and curiosity, as if he were waiting to see how much more of this I could take. Little did he know, my patience had finally run out. My mother's Thanksgiving table looked like something from a lifestyle magazine. Fine china that only appeared on special occasions, crystal glasses, cloth napkins folded into perfect triangles, and a centerpiece of autumnal flowers and miniature pumpkins. Name cards designated our seating arrangement, and I noticed immediately that Marcus and Allison were placed at my father's right hand, the position of honor. I was seated between Aunt Meredith and Cousin Emily, as far from my father as possible. We took our seats with the formality of a state dinner. My father, at the head of the table, cleared his throat for the traditional Thanksgiving prayer. We all bowed our heads as he began. "Lord, we thank you for the blessings of this past year, for Marcus's promotion and his beautiful new home, for Allison's success with her charity work, for the good health of our family, for this food we are about to receive. Amen." Not a single mention of me or anything I had accomplished. It wasn't a surprise, but it still stung. "Amen," everyone echoed, and the clattering of serving dishes began. The first 15 minutes of dinner focused on complimenting my mother's cooking, discussing the parade we had all watched that morning, and Uncle James's golf game. Then, as the initial hunger was satisfied, the conversation turned to family updates. "Michael has been accepted to 3 colleges already," Aunt Meredith announced proudly. "We're waiting to hear from his top choice next month." "That's wonderful," my father said, nodding appreciatively. "Education is the foundation of success. Marcus graduated top of his class at Harvard, and look where he is now." And there it was, the redirection to the golden child. I took a long sip of wine. "Gerald, Aunt Meredith turned to me. Tell us about your work. Are you still designing those eco-friendly buildings? Before I could answer, my mother jumped in. Gerald's still figuring things out with his business. But speaking of buildings, have I shown everyone the aerial view of Marcus and Allison's new property? It sits on almost an acre of land. She reached for her phone, ready to display yet another photo of my brother's real estate triumph. I caught Aunt Meredith's apologetic glance and gave her a small smile. This was how conversations about me had been derailed for years. The landscaping alone cost more than most people's entire homes, my mother continued, passing her phone around the table, and they're adding a guest house next spring. It's nothing special, Marcus said with practiced modesty, just a place to raise a family someday. He glanced at Allison, who smiled on cue. Which reminds me, my mother said, turning to me with a look I knew too well. Your brother finally has a real home, Gerald, a real investment in his future. When will you catch up? The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. When would I stop wasting time and start living up to the family standard? The table fell silent, all eyes on me, waiting for my usual deflection or self-deprecating joke. For years, I had played my assigned role in this family drama, accepting my position as the less successful son, the creative one who needed to be tolerated rather than celebrated. But something had changed. Perhaps it was the text from Sophie still lighting up my phone screen. Perhaps it was the culmination of years of dismissal. Or perhaps it was simply time to stop pretending I was less than I was. I set down my fork, met my mother's expectant gaze, and said calmly, I did. I just didn't invite anyone who doubts me. The silence that followed was absolute. My mother's smile froze. My father stopped mid-chew. Marcus's head snapped up, his expression shifting from smug to confused. What is that supposed to mean? My father finally asked, his tone suggesting I was being deliberately difficult. It means I bought my home over a year ago, I said, maintaining the calm I had practiced for this moment. I just chose not to share that information with people who have consistently undervalued my work and my choices. My mother's face flushed. Gerald, that's not fair. We've always supported your creative interests. Have you? I asked, still keeping my voice level. You've spent the last hour showing everyone pictures of Marcus's house while referring to my architecture firm as that green building thing and a phase. That's not support, Mom. That's dismissal. Marcus leaned forward, his corporate conflict resolution skills kicking in. Come on, Gerald. No need to make a scene. Mom and Dad are proud of both of us. I turned to him, years of being in his shadow fueling my response. Are they? Dad's prayer thanked God for your promotion and your house. I've been running a successful architecture firm for 2 years, but apparently that wasn't worth mentioning to the Almighty. A successful firm? My father's skepticism was palpable. You never said anything about being successful, we assumed. You assumed I was failing because that fit your narrative. I finished for him. You never asked any real questions about my business. You never showed any interest in my work. So I stopped sharing. I reached for my phone, opened my photo gallery, and slid it across the table to my father. That's my home. A restored Victorian in the historic district. Fully paid for. No mortgage. My father's eyes widened as he scrolled through the photos of my carefully renovated home, with its blend of historic charm and modern sustainable features. He passed the phone to my mother, whose expression shifted from disbelief to confusion. But how? She asked, staring at images of my spacious living room with its restored original woodwork and the kitchen Sophie and I had designed together. My little architecture business has been featured in Architectural Digest, Dwell, and Sustainable Home, I said, unable to keep a hint of pride from my voice. I've won 3 design awards in the past year. I have a team of 12 employees and clients waitlisted 6 months out. Marcus grabbed the phone from our mother, scrolling rapidly through the photos with increasing discomfort. Why wouldn't you tell us any of this? He demanded, as if I had somehow cheated by succeeding without his knowledge. Because you never listened when I tried, I replied simply. Because every achievement of mine has always been overshadowed by Marcus's latest accomplishment. Because I got tired of having my passion dismissed as a hobby. Aunt Meredith broke the tension with a warm laugh. Good for you, Gerald. I always knew you had something special with your designs. This is unexpected, my father said finally, his worldview visibly shaken. Why keep it a secret? Were you trying to make us look foolish today? I shook my head. I wasn't planning to bring this up at all. I've been keeping my life private because it's been healthier for me. But I'm tired of sitting at this table year after year, listening to comments about when I'll catch up or get serious about my life. My mother, still processing, asked in a small voice, "Is your house really paid off? No mortgage at all?" The question was so typical of her values that I had to smile. "Yes, Mom, completely paid off. It's actually worth more than Marcus's new place, based on the last appraisal." Marcus's face darkened. "This isn't a competition, Gerald. Isn't it?" I challenged. "It has been since we were kids. The difference is, I'm not playing anymore." I pulled up a video call on my phone and dialed Sophie. When her face appeared on the screen, bright and beautiful, I turned the phone toward my family. "And this is Sophie, my partner in both business and life. We've been together for almost 2 years." "Hello, everyone," Sophie said with a small wave, her confidence evident even through the screen. "I've heard so much about you all." "We haven't heard anything about you," my mother said, a hint of accusation in her tone. "That was my choice," I explained. "Sophie has been encouraging me to bridge this gap for months. She believes family connections are important, even when they're complicated." The dinner had come to a complete standstill, the turkey growing cold as my family tried to reconcile their perception of me with this new reality. Cousin Michael broke the silence with a teenager's brutal honesty. "So Uncle Gerald is actually super successful, and nobody knew because nobody asked? That's messed up." Out of the mouths of babes, the simple truth hung in the air, undeniable and uncomfortable. Nobody had bothered to really ask about my life, because they had already decided what the answer would be. My father pushed back his chair, the legs scraping loudly against the floor. "I think Gerald and I need to have a private conversation," he said, standing up. "Marcus, you too." As we rose to follow him out to the back porch, I caught Aunt Meredith's encouraging nod. For the first time in years, I felt seen at my family's table. The conversation ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was long overdue. The back porch was enclosed for winter, with heat lamps creating pockets of warmth in the chilly November air. My father led us to the far corner, away from the windows where curious family members might watch our conversation. He sat heavily in an Adirondack chair, looking suddenly older than his 68 years. "All right, Gerald," he said, his businessman's directness cutting through any pretense. "Let's see these magazine features you claim to have." The word claim stung, but I was prepared. I opened a folder on my phone and handed it to him, displaying the digital version of the Architectural Digest spread, featuring my design for the tech CEO's home. 6 glossy pages, showcasing my vision brought to life, with my name and firm prominently credited. My father scrolled slowly, his expression unreadable. Marcus looked over his shoulder, his competitive nature clearly unsettled by tangible proof of my success. "The writer calls your work revolutionary and the future of residential design," my father noted, a hint of surprise in his voice. "That project put Green Horizon on the map," I explained. After it was published, we had to hire 3 more architects to handle the inquiries. "Green Horizon, that's your company?" My father looked up from the phone. "Yes, we specialize in sustainable luxury design. Homes and commercial spaces that are environmentally responsible without sacrificing aesthetics or comfort." "And this is profitable?" The accountant in him couldn't help asking. "Very. We've grown by 40% each year since we started. Our client list includes tech entrepreneurs, progressive businesses, and environmentally conscious investors." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "If you're doing so well, why keep it from us? Were you trying to make us look bad today?" I turned to my brother, seeing clearly for the first time how my success threatened the hierarchy he had enjoyed his entire life. "No, Marcus. I kept it to myself because every time I shared any achievement, it was diminished or ignored. It became easier to build my life without constantly seeking validation that never came." "That's ridiculous," my father interjected. "We've always supported both our sons." "Have you?" I challenged. "When I made project manager at Bradshaw, the youngest in the firm's history, I told you at Christmas dinner. You responded by asking when I was going to get serious about my life, then turned the conversation back to Marcus's engagement." My father frowned, clearly not remembering the incident that had been so pivotal for me. "And Mom has introduced me as the artistic one my entire life, as if being creative is some kind of character flaw to be tolerated rather than a skill to be valued." "You're being oversensitive," Marcus said dismissively. "Not everyone gets a trophy in real life, Gerald. Is that what you think this is about? Wanting recognition?" I shook my head. "This is about basic respect, about acknowledging that success comes in different forms. I don't need trophies or constant praise. I just wanted my family to see me clearly, not as some failed version of you." My father handed the phone back to me, his brow furrowed. "So this house of yours," he said, changing the subject. "You said it's fully paid off? How did you manage that at your age?" It was such a typical response, focusing on the financial rather than the emotional, that I almost laughed. "My business has been very successful, Dad, and I invested early in sustainable technology companies that aligned with my values. Those investments paid off significantly. And you never thought to consult me about these investments? I could have advised you. You would have told me they were too risky, just like you told me starting my own firm was too risky. I needed to make these decisions for myself." The door to the porch opened, and my mother stepped out, hugging herself against the cold. "What's going on out here? The turkey's getting cold, and everyone's waiting." "Mom, did you look at the pictures of Gerald's house?" Marcus asked, his tone suggesting he was still processing this shift in family dynamics. "I did," she said, her voice small. "It's lovely, Gerald, but I don't understand why we weren't invited to see it in person. Are you ashamed of us?" The question hit me hard, revealing how completely she had misunderstood the situation. "No, Mom. I was protecting myself from having my achievements dismissed, like they always have been." "That's not true," she protested. "We've always been proud of you. Then why refer to my business as that green building phase? Why show everyone pictures of Marcus's house but never ask to see mine? Why spend holidays talking about his career but treat mine like a hobby?" Tears filled her eyes. "We just worry about you. The arts aren't stable. We wanted you to have security." "I have security, Mom. I have a successful business, a beautiful home, and a relationship with someone who sees and values me completely. What I haven't had is parents who could be happy for me on my terms, not just on theirs." The door opened again, and Aunt Meredith poked her head out. "Sorry to interrupt, but people are starting to eat. Should we wait or go ahead?" My father stood up. "We'll be right in." After Aunt Meredith retreated, he turned to me with a sigh. "We should finish this conversation another time, but I want to see this house of yours and meet this Sophie properly." It wasn't an apology or an acknowledgement of the deeper issues, but it was a start. "I'd like that," I said cautiously. As we moved toward the door, Marcus stopped me with a hand on my arm. "Why didn't you ever say anything? All these years, watching me get the attention, why stay silent?" I looked at my younger brother, seeing him clearly, perhaps for the first time. "Because it wasn't about competing with you, Marcus. It was about finding my own path. And I couldn't do that while constantly trying to win approval that was never going to come." We rejoined the family at the table, where conversation had continued in awkward fits and starts. As we took our seats, Aunt Meredith raised her glass. "I think a toast is in order. To Gerald and his success. It seems we have 2 accomplished sons to celebrate in this family." The toast was well-intentioned but underscored the problem. Even now, my success was being framed in relation to Marcus's. But I raised my glass anyway, catching Sophie's encouraging smile from my phone screen, which I had propped against the centerpiece. "And to Sophie," Aunt Meredith added warmly, "who we hope to meet in person very soon." As the meal resumed, questions about my work and life came more freely. Cousin Emily asked about sustainable design principles. Uncle James inquired about my historic home's renovation challenges. For the first time at a family gathering, I found myself actually participating rather than observing from the sidelines. Marcus remained quiet, processing this shift in attention. My mother kept glancing between us, as if recalibrating her understanding of her sons. My father asked pointed questions about my business model and client acquisition strategy, approaching my career with the same seriousness he had always given Marcus's. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation. Years of established patterns couldn't be undone in a single dinner. But as we finished our pumpkin pie, I felt a weight lifting. The truth was finally on the table, alongside the turkey and stuffing. What would happen next remained to be seen, but at least now we were dealing with reality rather than the comfortable fiction my family had constructed. As the dinner wound down, I caught Sophie's eye on the video call. "I should go," I told her. "I'll call you when I'm heading home." "Good luck," she said. "I'm proud of you." Those simple words, spoken with genuine feeling, highlighted everything that had been missing from my family interactions for so long. As I ended the call and helped clear the table, I wondered if bridges could truly be rebuilt after so many years, or if some distance would always remain between us. After dinner, the family dispersed throughout the house. Aunt Meredith and Uncle James took their children to the living room to watch football. My mother busied herself with storing leftovers, her movements jerky and unsettled. My father retreated to his den. The door closed more firmly than usual. Marcus stood in the kitchen doorway, watching me help with the dishes. "Can we talk?" he asked finally. "Outside?" I nodded, drying my hands on a dish towel. We grabbed our coats and stepped onto the front porch, away from the back where we had our earlier conversation with our father. The evening had grown colder, our breath visible in the November air. "So all this time, while we thought you were struggling, you were actually building this whole other life," Marcus began, his tone accusatory. "Was today some kind of revenge? Making us all look foolish in front of the extended family?" I leaned against the porch railing, studying my younger brother. "Is that what you think this was about? Embarrassing you? What else am I supposed to think? You show up with these bombshells about your success, your house, your girlfriend, after deliberately keeping us in the dark for years. I kept you in the dark because every time I shared something important about my life, it was dismissed or overshadowed," I explained, trying to keep frustration from my voice. "Today wasn't planned. Mom pushed too far with her comments about your house, and I finally stood up for myself." Marcus paced the length of the porch, struggling to process. "Do you have any idea how this makes Mom and Dad feel? All these years they thought you needed their help, their guidance. They assumed I needed help because they never believed my path was valid," I countered. "They decided architecture was a hobby, not a career. They decided my creative skills were less valuable than your analytical ones. I stopped sharing because I got tired of having my choices questioned and my achievements minimized." "That's not fair," Marcus protested. "They've always wanted what's best for both of us. What's best according to their definition," I clarified. "Success to them looks like your life. Corporate job, suburban house, traditional marriage. Anything outside that narrow vision is considered less than." Marcus stopped pacing, facing me directly. "So you've been judging us while complaining about being judged?" The question caught me off guard. There was some truth to it, uncomfortable as it was to admit. "Maybe I have," I conceded. "But can you honestly tell me you haven't benefited from being the favorite? From having your choices celebrated while mine were questioned?" Before he could answer, the front door opened, and our father stepped out. "Mind if I join you, boys?" he asked, though it wasn't really a question. He settled into one of the porch chairs, looking between us. "Your mother is upset," he stated simply. "I'm sorry about that," I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, I had never wanted to hurt her. "She feels like you've shut her out of your life deliberately, like you don't trust her." "It wasn't about trust," I tried to explain. "It was about protection." "Protection from what?" My father's tone was genuinely confused. "From constantly feeling like I wasn't enough, from having my passion treated like a phase, from comparison." My father was silent for a moment. "We never meant to make you feel that way," he finally said. "We worried about you choosing a less stable path. We wanted security for you. But I found security, Dad. Just not in the way you expected." The door opened again, and my mother joined us, her eyes red-rimmed. I couldn't help overhearing, she said. "Gerald, do you really think we don't value you?" The direct question deserved a direct answer. "I think you value a version of success that never fit who I am," I said gently. "I think you've always seen my differences from Marcus as deficiencies rather than just differences." Tears welled in her eyes. "We only wanted what was best for you. I know that. But at some point, you have to trust that I know what's best for me." Marcus watched this exchange with an unreadable expression. "So what now?" he asked. "We just pretend everything's fine?" "No," I said firmly. "We acknowledge that there's been a problem. We try to build something more authentic going forward. If that's what everyone wants." My father cleared his throat. "I'd like to see this business of yours, and your home, get a better understanding of what you've built." It was a small olive branch, but significant coming from him. "I'd like that," I agreed. "Maybe after the holidays?" My mother wiped her eyes. "And we should meet Sophie properly. Not through a phone screen at Thanksgiving dinner. She'd like that. She's been encouraging me to reconnect with you all for months." "She sounds wise," my mother said, attempting a smile. "She is," I confirmed. "She sees value in family connections, even when they're complicated." We stood in silence for a moment, the four of us processing the shift in our family dynamic. It wasn't resolution, not yet, but it was a beginning. "I think I should head home," I said finally. "It's getting late, and I promised to call Sophie." "Gerald," my father said as I prepared to leave, I'm proud of what you've accomplished. I should have said that earlier. The words I had waited decades to hear, delivered awkwardly on a cold porch after an emotional confrontation. Thank you, Dad. That means a lot. Goodbyes were stilted but genuine. Aunt Meredith hugged me tightly and whispered, "About time they saw what I've always seen in you." Uncle James clapped me on the shoulder with newfound respect. My cousins extracted promises to see my awesome eco-house sometime. The drive home was a blur of emotional processing. I called Sophie as promised, recounting the conversations and confrontations. "It sounds like a beginning," she said, "not an ending." "It feels more like the middle," I admitted, "like we've acknowledged the problem, but haven't solved it." "Family relationships aren't problems to be solved," Sophie reminded me gently. "They're connections to be maintained and improved over time." When I arrived home, she was waiting on the porch, a welcoming light in our beautiful historic home. As we sat in our kitchen, drinking tea and debriefing the day's events, I wondered what the path forward would look like. Over the next few days, tentative communications began. My mother texted to ask for photos of my garden. My father emailed questions about sustainable building practices. Marcus sent a brief message. "We should grab lunch sometime. Just us." Each outreach felt like a small test, a careful step onto newly discovered ground. I responded to each one, matching their cautious tone but remaining open to possibility. After a week of this digital dance, I made a decision. I sent my parents an invitation to Sunday dinner at my home, with a note that Sophie and I would love to show them the renovation we had completed. Their acceptance came quickly, suggesting they had been waiting for such an invitation. The walls between us had begun to crack, letting in light. Whether they would fall completely or be rebuilt into something healthier remained to be seen. But for the first time in years, I felt hopeful about my family relationships. Not because I had finally gained their approval, but because I had learned to stand firmly in my own worth, regardless of their validation. 1 month after the Thanksgiving revelation, my parents' car pulled into the circular driveway of my historic Victorian home. From the window, I watched their expressions as they took in the detailed gingerbread trim, the solar panels integrated discreetly into the roof design, and the winter garden Sophie had created with native plants that maintained their beauty even in December. "They're here," I told Sophie, who was arranging a cheese platter in the kitchen. She squeezed my hand reassuringly. "Remember, this is on your terms now," she said. "This is your home, your success, your life." I opened the front door before they could ring the bell. My mother stood on the porch, clutching a bouquet of flowers and a bottle of wine. My father stood slightly behind her, his posture betraying his discomfort at being in unfamiliar territory, both literally and figuratively. "Welcome," I said, stepping aside to let them enter. My mother's gasp was audible as she crossed the threshold into the foyer, with its restored original woodwork, stained glass accents, and the sweeping staircase that had first made me fall in love with the property. "Gerald," she breathed, "this is magnificent." My father moved past her, his eyes traveling up to the coffered ceiling and the discreetly placed LED lighting that highlighted architectural details while using minimal energy. "You did all this?" he asked, genuine amazement in his voice. "The structural work was done by contractors," I explained, "but Sophie and I designed everything, selected materials, and did a lot of the finishing work ourselves." Sophie emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. "Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds, it's wonderful to finally meet you in person." She embraced my mother with natural warmth that momentarily flustered Patricia, who was used to more formal greetings. "Please, call me Patricia," my mother said, handing over the flowers. "These are for your lovely home. Let me give you the tour before dinner," I offered, leading them through each room of the first floor. In the living room, my mother paused before the wall of awards and magazine covers I had framed. "The Burnham Sustainability Award," she read aloud. "The Green Design Innovation Prize." Her fingers traced the glass covering the Architectural Digest feature. "Why didn't you tell us about any of this, Gerald?" The question held less accusation than it had at Thanksgiving, more genuine confusion and hurt. "I tried. In the beginning," I said carefully. "But after years of having my career treated as less important than Marcus's, I stopped trying. It was easier to build this life without constantly seeking validation that never came." Tears filled her eyes, but unlike at Thanksgiving, these seemed to come from understanding rather than self-pity. "I never realized we were doing that to you. We were just so worried about you choosing a difficult path." "The path was difficult sometimes," I acknowledged, "but it was right for me." My father, who had been examining the smart home features with interest, rejoined the conversation. "The craftsmanship here is exceptional," he said, running his hand along a restored banister. "You have an eye for detail, son. Always did, even as a boy." It was perhaps the first time he had acknowledged my creative talent as a strength rather than a curiosity. We moved to the dining room, where Sophie had set the table with a careful blend of elegance and comfort. Over dinner, my parents asked questions about my business, my designs, and our home renovation, listening with an attentiveness I had rarely experienced from them. The most revolutionary aspect of our approach is integrating sustainability without sacrificing luxury or comfort, I explained, warming to my subject. People used to think eco-friendly meant compromise, but we're proving it can actually enhance the living experience. My father nodded thoughtfully. "I've been reading about green building since Thanksgiving," he admitted. "There's more to it than I realized. The economic benefits of energy efficiency alone make a compelling business case." It was surreal, discussing my work with my father as a fellow professional rather than as a disappointed parent. Even more surprising was his grudging respect when I showed him my studio after dinner, explaining current projects and design challenges. "You've built something remarkable here," he said, studying the 3D model of a zero-carbon office building we were designing, both in your home and your business. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, I overheard my mother talking with Sophie as they prepared coffee. "I've never seen Gerald so confident, so settled," Patricia said. "You must be a wonderful influence." "Gerald found his confidence himself," Sophie replied kindly but firmly. "He just needed space to build his life on his own terms." Later, as we gathered in the living room with dessert, my mother set down her plate and looked at me directly. "I owe you an apology, Gerald, for years of comparison and dismissal. I didn't see the damage it was doing because it was so ingrained in how I thought about success." Her words, clearly rehearsed but nonetheless sincere, hung in the air between us. I found myself unexpectedly moved. "Thank you, Mom. That means a lot." "We're proud of you," my father added, less comfortable with emotional declarations but making the effort nonetheless. "Different path than we expected, but you've proven it was the right one for you." The evening ended with tentative plans for Christmas. "Would you consider hosting?" my mother asked. "We could keep it small, just immediate family." I glanced at Sophie, who nodded encouragingly. "I'd like that," I said, "but I should warn you, we do Christmas differently here. Local foods, sustainable gifts, none of the excessive consumption." To my surprise, my mother smiled. "It sounds refreshing, actually. A new tradition." As they prepared to leave, my father lingered in the foyer. "Have you spoken with Marcus since Thanksgiving?" "We've texted a few times," I said. "He suggested lunch, but our schedules haven't aligned yet." My father nodded. This has been an adjustment for him too, having to share the spotlight after all these years. It was the closest he had come to acknowledging the favoritism that had shaped our family dynamic. "I'm not interested in competing with Marcus," I said truthfully. "I just want mutual respect." "He'll get there," my father assured me. "He's always admired you more than you know." That revelation stayed with me after they left, as Sophie and I cleaned up from dinner. "That went better than expected," she observed, loading the dishwasher. "It did," I agreed. "It felt like the beginning of something new, rather than trying to fix the old relationship." "Exactly," Sophie said. "You're not trying to be the son they wanted anymore. You're inviting them to know the man you actually are." The Christmas gathering proved her right. Marcus and Allison joined us, along with my parents, for a celebration that reflected our values rather than conforming to family traditions. The initial awkwardness between Marcus and me gradually eased as we found common ground in unexpected areas, his business acumen complementing my creative perspective in conversations about sustainable investment. "Your place makes my house look like a cookie-cutter McMansion," he admitted as we shared a quiet moment on the back porch. Not that I'd ever tell Mom that. I laughed, sensing the beginning of a more authentic brotherhood than we had ever managed before. My business continued to thrive in the new year, with a major commission for an eco-friendly cultural center that would showcase our philosophy on a larger scale than ever before. Sophie and I began discussing marriage, planning a small ceremony that would reflect our values rather than social expectations. The freedom I had found, first in separation from my family's approval and now in reconnection on my terms, permeated every aspect of my life. I no longer felt the weight of comparison or the need to justify my choices. I had built a life that aligned with my values and brought me fulfillment, regardless of whether it matched anyone else's definition of success. For those of you watching who have felt unappreciated by family or judged for taking an unconventional path, I hope my story offers some perspective. Sometimes standing your ground is the greatest gift you can give, not just to yourself, but to the people who have failed to see your worth. True healing doesn't always mean forgetting the past, but it does mean creating a future that honors who you truly are. Has your family ever underestimated you or dismissed your dreams? How did you respond? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to see more content about authentic living and standing in your truth. Share this video with someone who might need a reminder that their worth isn't determined by family approval. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And remember that sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is simply, I did. I just didn't invite anyone who doubts me.